The great hall of the alien palace was silent. The silence was heavy, almost alive, pressing down on the humans who stood inside. Metal pillars rose like the trunks of black trees. Strange banners of alien silk hung from the ceiling, each marked with symbols that no human could read. A cold light shone from crystals set into the walls, giving the whole chamber a ghostly glow. And at the far end of the hall, high upon her throne, sat the alien queen. Her form was both beautiful and terrifying. Her body shimmered like carved glass, her skin rippling with shades of blue and silver. Her crown was not made of metal, but bone, grown straight from her skull like sharp white horns. Her eyes, golden and endless, burned as if they held the weight of 1,000 wars. The queen's soldiers stood in rows on both sides of the chamber. They were tall, armored beasts with claws instead of hands, their bodies covered in plates of living armor. Their tails twitched in rhythm, clicking against the floor like drums of war. Every soldier's gaze was fixed on the humans. There were only a handful of humans in that hall: ambassadors, generals, scientists. Men and women chosen to speak for their entire species. Yet, at that moment, none of them could speak at all. The queen's voice cut through the silence. It was not a shout. It was not even loud. But it carried power, the kind that froze hearts in chests. You humans break machines. You break planets. You break everything you touch. Why should you not be broken in turn? Her words echoed. The humans shifted uneasily. One man lowered his head, ashamed. A woman swallowed hard, her lips trembling as if to speak, but no sound came. Another closed his eyes, whispering a prayer. The queen's soldiers waited for the order. One single word from her, and they would tear the humans apart. But then, from the back of the group, someone moved. It was not a general. It was not a scientist. It was not an ambassador trained in the art of politics. It was a mechanic. His name was not written in history books. He was no hero, no soldier, no leader. He wore no shining medals, only a jumpsuit stained with grease and oil. His hands were scarred from years of labor, his face worn from days spent under engines and machines. He did not belong among the chosen. He had only come because he had been repairing a transport ship nearby when the summons arrived. Somehow, by mistake or fate, he was brought into the queen's hall with the others. And now, against all reason, he stepped forward. Every human turned to stare at him in shock. The aliens hissed and growled, their tails slamming against the ground. How dare a common worker move before their queen? The mechanic's heart pounded so loudly he thought it might burst. His throat was dry, his body shaking. He had no weapon, no authority. But he had lived his whole life surrounded by broken things. And something in the queen's words had struck him deep. He cleared his throat, his voice rough, uncertain. Because, he said, we fix what we break. The chamber fell silent again. For 1 second, the entire universe seemed to pause. The queen's golden eyes narrowed. She leaned forward on her throne, her long claws curling against the armrests. Her soldiers hissed in outrage, ready to strike. But the queen raised one hand. At once, every soldier fell silent. Explain, she said. Her voice was sharper now, like the edge of a blade. The mechanic swallowed. His mind screamed at him to stop, to turn back, to hide. But his mouth spoke anyway. Engines fail. Bridges collapse. We break things, yes. But we rebuild. Stronger. Smarter. Better. We make mistakes and we learn. That's what makes us human. The ambassadors gasped. The generals whispered angrily, urging him to stop. But the queen's eyes stayed locked on him. You admit weakness, she said. You admit failure. You call this strength. The mechanic took a deep breath. His hands were still shaking, but his voice grew steadier. I buried friends under machines I built wrong. I've watched ships burn because I missed a detail. I've failed. Again and again. But every scar I carry reminds me never to give up. We fall but we rise. That is our strength. The queen said nothing. Her soldiers shifted uneasily, waiting. The humans held their breath, praying she would not take his words as insult. For a long moment, silence ruled the hall. And then, the queen's eyes glowed brighter. Something unreadable flashed across her face. Perhaps, she said slowly, there is more to you than I thought. Her words rolled across the chamber like thunder. The mechanic stood there, small and trembling before her throne, but he did not lower his gaze. For the first time since humanity entered the hall, the silence was no longer fear, it was possibility. The alien queen leaned back on her throne, her golden eyes never leaving the trembling human mechanic. The air in the great hall was heavy, charged with tension. Every soldier stood frozen, waiting for her command. Every human held their breath, hoping the mechanic's daring words had not doomed them all. At last, the queen raised one clawed hand. A deep rumble echoed through the chamber as a side door opened. From the shadows, two alien soldiers dragged forth a broken machine. It was a war drone, an alien weapon, feared across a dozen galaxies. Its frame was jagged and insect-like, made of metal that seemed to shimmer as though alive. Its wings, once sharp as blades, hung broken and twisted. Sparks spat angrily from its cracked core. The smell of burning oil and scorched circuits filled the air. The queen's voice rang out, calm and cruel. You say humans fix what they break. Then fix this. If you succeed, perhaps your species lives. If you fail. She did not need to finish. The soldiers slammed the drone onto the stone floor with a crash. The sound echoed like a hammer striking a coffin. The mechanic's throat went dry. His knees nearly buckled under the weight of her demand. This was no human machine. Its systems were alien, fluid, organic, unpredictable. The very sight of its glowing circuits filled him with dread. He glanced at the ambassadors, the generals, the scientists. None spoke. None offered to step forward. Their eyes begged him to refuse, but he saw fear in their faces. Fear for themselves, fear for all of humanity. And so, with a deep, shaky breath, he stepped toward the broken war drone. The soldiers hissed, tails striking the floor. One leaned close and snarled, touch it wrong, human, and it will kill you. The mechanic ignored the threat. He knelt before the wreckage. His calloused hands hovered above the sparking wires, his mind racing. He whispered to himself, the way he always did when faced with a broken engine. All right, let's see what makes you tick. The struggle. The machine was a nightmare. Its wiring was not wires at all, but veins of liquid metal. Its circuits pulsed like arteries, glowing with alien light. Its core sputtered, like a dying heart. The mechanic pulled a small toolkit from his belt. He had only the most basic tools: pliers, cutters, a screwdriver. He swallowed hard. These were human tools, crude compared to the alien tech before him. But they were all he had. He reached for a glowing cable. It writhed beneath his touch, snapping like a live snake. Sparks exploded, burning his palm. He hissed in pain, but held steady. The queen's voice echoed above. Do you falter, human? The mechanic gritted his teeth. Not yet. Minute by minute, he fought with the machine. He cut, twisted, and joined pieces, his fingers blistering with heat. Each time he thought he had made progress, the drone screamed in protest, its systems sparking violently. The alien soldiers laughed at his struggle, their voices dripping with scorn. One hissed, pathetic. Even a child of the hive could repair it faster. But the mechanic ignored them. His world narrowed to the machine before him. The smell of smoke, the hiss of energy, the sting of sparks, these were familiar to him. He had lived his life inside engines, losing himself in the rhythm of repair. And slowly, painfully, the rhythm returned. The breakthrough. Sweat dripped into his eyes. His arms ached. His burned fingers bled. Still, he worked. He remembered the Queen's words, remembered his own, "We fix what we break." He whispered to himself again. "We rebuild stronger, we rebuild smarter." At last, he found it. Deep inside the drone's chest, beneath layers of alien plating, he saw the problem: a shattered crystal core. It pulsed weakly, like a heart about to stop. The mechanic exhaled slowly. This was it. If he failed here, nothing else mattered. He pulled a small coil from his kit, a human part, nothing like the alien systems around it. Carefully, delicately, he spliced it into the drone's failing core. The machine screamed, shaking violently. The soldiers raised their weapons, ready to strike him down. But then, the sparks slowed. The hum steadied. The lights of the drone's body began to glow brighter. The mechanic stepped back, chest heaving. The war drone stirred. Its broken wings unfolded with a metallic shriek. Its glowing eyes lit up like twin suns. With a hiss, it rose to its feet. The great hall trembled under its weight. The alien soldiers recoiled, shocked. The drone turned, its eyes locking onto the Queen. Then, with a mechanical groan, it bowed. The Queen's judgment. The chamber erupted in gasps and growls. The ambassadors fell to their knees in relief. The soldiers hissed in disbelief. But the Queen, she smiled. It was a small smile, sharp and dangerous, but a smile nonetheless. "You fixed what was not yours," she said softly. "You touched what you did not understand, and yet, you made it whole." Her golden eyes glowed brighter as she leaned forward. "Perhaps humanity is not as useless as I believed." The mechanic, exhausted and trembling, wiped his scorched hands on his grease-stained jumpsuit. He wanted to collapse, but he forced himself to stand tall. Because for the first time, he knew he had not only saved a machine. He had saved his people. The war drone's glowing eyes dimmed, settling into a calm, steady rhythm. The mechanic stood before it, chest heaving, sweat dripping down his face. His hands were blistered and blackened from burns. But he did not flinch. He stood tall, his gaze fixed on the throne. The Queen watched him in silence. Her golden eyes narrowed, studying every detail of the human who had dared to step forward. The great hall was silent, save for the low hum of the drone behind him. Finally, the Queen spoke. Her voice was soft this time, but each word carried the weight of command. "You suffer. You break. You bleed. And yet, you rise." She leaned forward, her crown of bone catching the crystal light. Her voice sharpened. "Do you not see? This is weakness. Scars are proof of failure. Pain is proof of flaw. You admit it yourself, you fail again and again. Why should such a fragile species survive?" The words struck like blows. The generals bowed their heads in shame. The ambassadors clenched their fists, silent and afraid. But the mechanic did not step back. His heart thundered in his chest, but his eyes stayed steady. He raised his burned hands, showing them to the hall. "Yes," he said. His voice was rough, but clear. "I have scars. More than I can count. Each one is a reminder of the mistakes I've made. Each one is proof that I tried. And each one taught me to do better." The Queen tilted her head, her golden gaze unblinking. "You wear failure as a crown." The mechanic shook his head. "No, I wear it as memory." He paused, searching for words. His throat was dry, but the silence of the hall demanded he speak. "I've lost people because of my mistakes. I've held the hands of dying friends who trusted me to keep them safe. Do you think I forgot them? No, I carry them with me. Every scar I bear is their voice reminding me never again. Never give up. Never stop fixing what is broken. The Queen's soldiers hissed at his boldness, tails slamming against the floor. But the Queen silenced them with a single raised claw. She leaned closer, her eyes glowing like fire. You turn suffering into strength, she said slowly. You call wounds a lesson. Pain a teacher. Is this your answer, human? That your worth is in how much agony you can endure? The mechanic's chest tightened. He thought of long nights spent in freezing hangars, working by dim lights. He thought of the scars across his arms, the burns across his palms, the ache in his back that never left. He thought of his sister, gone because of a ship he had failed to fix in time. His voice cracked, but he did not look away. Our worth, he said, is in what we do with the pain. We don't endure it for nothing. We use it. We take the lessons. We build something better. The Queen's expression flickered, just for a moment. It was not anger. It was not mockery. It was something else, something hidden. The mechanic took a step forward. He knew he was walking the edge of a blade, but the words poured from him now. You think scars are weakness? Then look again. Scars mean survival. They mean we did not fall and stay down. They mean we got up, and we kept going. Every scar tells a story not of failure, but of fighting back. The chamber shook with the force of his words. Even the human generals, once silent, looked up at him with wide eyes. The ambassadors straightened, hope flickering in their faces. The Queen rose slowly from her throne. She towered above him, her shadow falling over his small human frame. The sound of her armored feet echoed across the floor as she stepped closer. She stopped only a few paces away. Her claws flexed, long and sharp enough to cut stone. Her eyes bored into him like suns. You dare to speak of scars in my hall, she said. Her voice trembled, not with rage, but with something deeper. Do you think I do not know them? The mechanic's breath caught. For the first time, he saw past her golden eyes. He saw the faintest cracks in her skin, lines of old wounds that shimmered faintly beneath her shimmering flesh. Her voice lowered. I have buried children. I have watched worlds burn because I failed to protect them. I, too, carry scars. The hall was silent. Neither soldier nor human dared move. The mechanic whispered, then you know. You know they are not weakness. The Queen's jaw tightened. Her hands curled into fists. For a long moment, she said nothing. Her soldiers shifted uneasily, unsure if they were about to watch their queen destroy him or embrace his words. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was quiet, almost thoughtful. Perhaps, you are not as fragile as I believed. She turned, walking back toward her throne. Each step echoed like thunder in the vast chamber. The mechanic remained frozen, his heart pounding. The Queen sat once more, her golden eyes still locked on him. You have given me an answer, human, she said. But it is not enough. Words are wind. I will see if your species lives by them, or dies by them. The mechanic swallowed hard. He knew this was not the end. It was only the beginning. And yet, for the first time since stepping into the hall, he felt something new stirring inside him. Not just fear. Not just defiance. Hope. The mechanic stood where he was, hands raw and blistered, as the alien queen settled once more into her throne. The silence in the chamber was crushing, yet it carried a strange weight of expectation, as though the entire hall leaned forward to see what would happen next. The repaired war drone stood tall at the Queen's side, humming steadily, its glowing eyes proof of what the human had accomplished. But the Queen was not satisfied. Her gaze remained fixed on the mechanic, sharp and burning. You have spoken of scars, she said at last. You have told me that pain teaches, that failure shapes strength. But words are not enough. One machine is not enough. I will know if humanity truly deserves to live. She raised her hand. At her gesture, the great doors at the side of the chamber rumbled open. From the darkness beyond came a group of aliens carrying fragments of broken technology. Some were weapons, jagged and sharp, their cores leaking unstable energy. Others were tools of farming and building, cracked and lifeless. There were even small alien devices the size of a child's toy, their lights long extinguished. The fragments clattered onto the floor before the mechanic in a chaotic pile. The Queen's voice echoed through the chamber. These are relics of my people. Once they brought life, then they failed us. For centuries they have remained broken. No one has dared to repair them. Fix them, human. Prove that what you claim is true, that your kind does not simply break, but rebuild. The mechanic stared at the pile of alien wreckage, his stomach sinking. It was chaos. Pieces bent beyond recognition. Circuits shattered like glass. Some looked so alien they didn't even resemble machines at all. His heart pounded, and for a moment, fear threatened to choke him. This was no simple test. It was an impossible demand. Behind him, the ambassadors muttered anxiously. One of the generals hissed in a low voice, "Don't try it. You'll only fail." But the mechanic didn't move. He thought of the Queen's words, and more importantly, of the silent millions back on Earth who depended on the outcome of this trial. If he backed away now, if he refused, humanity's fate was sealed. He dropped to his knees before the pile of broken things. His hands, though blistered and burned, reached out without hesitation. One by one, he lifted the pieces, studying them. A cracked power core. A shattered farming implement. A child's glowing orb toy with its light dead. Each one was strange, confusing, alien beyond imagination, but he whispered to himself the same words he had spoken to countless broken engines before. "All right, let's see what makes you tick." Hours seemed to blur together as he worked. Sweat drenched his back, dripping into his eyes. His body screamed for rest, but his mind sharpened with focus. He began with the simplest, a broken lamp-like orb, its casing cracked. He spliced its wires with pieces of another device, bridging the dead lines. The orb flickered once, twice, then glowed steady. A soft light filled the floor, reflecting in the golden eyes of the Queen. Murmurs rippled through the alien soldiers. The mechanic barely noticed. He had moved on, his hands trembling but persistent. A cracked tool lay before him, once used for shaping stone. Its core was burned out. He pried it open, muttered curses under his breath, then fitted part of the child's toy into its center. The tool whined, sputtered, then roared to life, glowing brighter than before. Piece after piece, he stitched the dead things together, finding new uses for old fragments, rebuilding not as they had been, but as they could be. To the aliens, it looked like madness. To him, it was instinct. He had always lived in scraps and salvage. Nothing ever came new in his world. Every fix was a patchwork of desperation, creativity, and stubborn hope. By the time he reached the final device, a weapon with a shattered barrel, his fingers bled openly, staining the alien metal red. He bent the pieces into shape, reinforced them with fragments of farming tools, and rewired its firing core with parts scavenged from the glowing orb. When he stepped back, the weapon was not the same as before. It was something new, something better. The chamber fell utterly silent. Before the Queen stood a pile that had once been worthless fragments, now humming with life, glowing with steady light. The mechanic swayed on his feet, exhausted, his arms heavy at his sides. But his voice was steady when he spoke. "You asked if scars meant weakness. Look at these. They were broken, yes. But I gave them new life. Stronger than before. Different, but whole again. That is what we do. That is what humans do." The Queen rose slowly from her throne. The soldiers shifted nervously, unsure of what their ruler would do. Her shadow stretched across the glowing devices, across the trembling human who had rebuilt them. She stopped before him, her golden eyes burning into his. "Curious," she said at last, her voice low, almost thoughtful. "Your people take pride not in perfection, but in imperfection transformed. You do not erase failure, you carry it, shape it, and make it into something greater." She extended one long clawed hand toward the weapon he had remade. She lifted it effortlessly, examining it in the pale light. "This is not as it was. But it is stronger. In its scars, it is reborn." Her gaze flicked back to him. "And so, perhaps, are you." The mechanic bowed his head, not in submission, but in exhaustion. His voice was little more than a whisper, but it carried through the chamber. "That is what we are. Not perfect. Never perfect. But always trying. Always rebuilding." The Queen studied him for a long, silent moment. Then, slowly, she sat back upon her throne. "Perhaps your species has earned more time." The chamber stirred with gasps from both alien and human alike. The mechanic, shaking but still standing, knew this was not the end. The Queen had tested him once more, and he had answered not with words alone, but with his hands, his pain, and his will. And though he was only a mechanic, in that moment, he carried the weight of all humanity upon his scarred shoulders. The repaired machines glowed softly on the floor, a pile of proof that the human mechanic's words were not empty. The chamber was silent, the air thick with disbelief. The alien soldiers shifted uneasily, tails scraping against stone, their golden eyes flicking nervously between their queen and the trembling man who had defied death to repair what they had abandoned. The Queen sat upon her throne, tall and radiant, yet her gaze lingered on the glowing relics for far longer than anyone expected. Her golden eyes burned, but it was not only with pride or anger. There was something else there, something hidden beneath the layers of command and majesty. At last, she rose. The sound of her movement filled the hall like thunder, each step echoing in the stillness. She walked forward, past the bowing soldiers, past the silent humans, until she stood only a breath away from the mechanic. He swayed on his feet, his body nearly spent, but he forced himself to meet her gaze. Her clawed hand reached out not toward him, but toward the glowing machines he had restored. She touched the cracked orb lamp, still glowing steadily, and her sharp features softened almost imperceptibly. Her voice, when it came, was quiet. Not the commanding roar of a queen, but something lower, more human. "You think scars are strength. You think pain is a teacher." Her golden eyes flicked toward him, narrowing slightly. "Do you believe you are the only one who knows such things?" The mechanic swallowed. His throat was dry. He dared not answer too quickly. Slowly, carefully, he shook his head. "No," he whispered. "I don't believe that." The Queen straightened, her body casting a long shadow over the chamber. "Then listen, human. I will show you what you claim to understand." She raised her hand. With a sharp motion, she tore away a piece of her shimmering armor from her chest. Gasps erupted from her soldiers, but none dared to move. Beneath the armor, her flesh glimmered faintly in the pale light, and there, etched deep across her body, were scars. They ran like rivers of fire across her skin, jagged, broken lines that glowed faintly as though the wounds had never fully healed. Each one told of battles fought, of survival clawed from the edge of destruction. The hall was silent. Even the mechanic, who had spoken boldly before, felt his words catch in his throat. For the first time, the alien queen was not untouchable, not flawless. She was scarred. Her voice trembled, not with weakness, but with memory. "I have ruled for centuries. I have seen suns die and worlds fall. I have buried warriors, brothers, children. Do you think I sit upon this throne untouched? No, I carry my scars, too. Her hand hovered over the deepest wound etched across her chest, glowing faintly as if it still burned after all these years. "This," she said softly, "was given to me on the day my firstborn fell. I swore I would never forget. And I never have." The mechanic felt his chest tighten. The soldiers bowed their heads, their tails stilling against the floor. Not even they had known the full depth of their queen's scars. The queen's golden eyes locked on the mechanic once more. "You dare to speak of pain as strength? Tell me then, human, what strength came from my suffering? What strength is there in the loss of a child, in the breaking of a people, in wounds that never heal?" Her words cut like blades. The mechanic's burned hands curled into fists at his sides. He felt the weight of her gaze, of the grief she had carried for centuries, pressing down on him like a mountain. He took a breath, steadying himself, though his voice shook when he finally spoke. "The strength is in this moment," he said. "In the fact that you are still standing. That you still lead. That you carry the memory, and it shapes every choice you make. The strength is not in the scar itself. It is in what you do with it." The queen tilted her head, her expression unreadable. He pressed on, his voice firmer now, his words carrying the desperation of a man who knew his entire species stood upon the edge of her judgment. "You said you never forgot your child. Then every scar is proof you still honor them. Every decision you make, every battle you fight, is built upon the memory of those you lost. That is strength. That is meaning. That is why you endure." The queen's eyes softened, just barely. Her soldiers shifted in shock. No one had ever dared speak to her in such a way, not even her highest commanders. Yet the human did not stop. "You asked what gives scars their worth," he said, his voice raw but unwavering. "It's not the pain. It's the reminder that life is precious. That we must protect it, even when it costs us everything. You carry scars for your people. I carry mine for mine. That's what makes us the same." Silence hung heavy in the chamber. The queen's golden eyes glimmered, her expression unreadable. Slowly, she lowered her hand from the scar across her chest. She turned her face slightly, as if hiding the faintest flicker of emotion from those around her. At last, she spoke, her voice quieter than anyone had ever heard. "Perhaps you are not as blind as I believed." She stepped back, her armor shifting to cover her scars once more, but the image of them lingered in every mind in the hall. For the first time, her soldiers looked at her not only with fear, but with awe, for they had seen that their queen was not beyond pain, not beyond grief. She was scarred, like them. Like the human. The mechanic bowed his head, not in defeat, but in solemn respect. For in that moment, he understood the queen better than any ambassador or general ever could. She was not just ruler, not just conqueror. She was a mother, a warrior, a survivor. And though she had tested him with broken machines, with impossible demands, it was this revelation that bound them together. Two beings, worlds apart, yet united by the scars they carried. The queen returned to her throne, her voice once more strong and commanding. "Words and scars may prove your worth, human. But this is not the end. I will know if humanity can rise beyond even this. The trial continues." The mechanic closed his eyes, drawing a shaky breath. His body ached, his mind burned, but his spirit had never been stronger. The chamber remained heavy with silence after the queen revealed her scars. Her soldiers stood still as stone, their golden eyes flickering with unease. The human mechanic, battered and weary, felt the weight of her gaze still pressing down upon him, even after she had returned to her throne. He had spoken boldly, he had mended her broken relics, and he had seen something no other outsider had ever witnessed: the pain of the alien queen herself. But she was not finished with him. Her golden eyes burned brighter as she leaned forward on her throne. Her voice, low and steady, rolled through the hall like thunder. "You have proven you can mend what is broken. You have shown that scars can hold meaning. But words and repairs are not enough. A true trial must cut deeper. The mechanic's heart clenched. He could feel it. The queen was about to set a test greater than any he had faced. With a wave of her clawed hand, the great doors of the chamber opened once more. The sound of armored feet echoed as soldiers marched in, dragging with them a machine unlike any the mechanic had seen. It was massive, towering over the chamber floor, a fusion of flesh and steel. Its chest was split open, sparks and smoke billowing out as though it were breathing its last breaths. It moaned with a strange, almost organic sound, caught between machine and creature. The mechanic took a step back. His stomach turned. This was no simple weapon, no broken tool. It was alive or something close to it. The queen's voice carried across the chamber. This is a guardian of my people. It once defended our cities. Now, it lies broken, corrupted. My soldiers call for it to be destroyed. But I command you, human, fix it. The words struck him like a hammer. Fix it? This thing wasn't just metal. It pulsed faintly, veins of alien light running through its body. It was alive, in pain. His hands shook as he studied it from a distance. What if I can't? He asked quietly. The queen's eyes narrowed. Then it will die, and with it, your people's hope. Fail, and humanity's fate is sealed. The ambassadors gasped, one even crying out, this is madness. But the queen silenced them with a single look. The mechanic's knees trembled, but he stepped forward anyway. His voice was hoarse, but steady. Then I'll try. He approached the broken guardian. Its body groaned and shifted as if aware of his presence. Its glowing eyes flickered weakly, focusing on him. There was no hatred in them, only exhaustion, only the silent plea of something that did not wish to die. The mechanic knelt beside it, ignoring the sweat dripping into his eyes, ignoring the pain in his blistered hands. He pressed his ear against its chest and listened. Beneath the sparks and the groans, there was a faint rhythm like a heartbeat. All right, he whispered. I hear you. Let's see what makes you tick. He opened his toolkit once more, though its contents were worn and nearly empty. What could human tools do against this? Yet he had no choice. He worked slowly, carefully, pulling back alien plates, cutting wires, stitching new connections with trembling hands. The guardian groaned in pain, its voice deep and strange. The mechanic flinched but did not stop. He murmured to it as though it could hear. Stay with me. Don't give up. The alien soldiers sneered, their tails slamming against the floor. One hissed, he toys with a corpse. Another growled, it will kill him before it lives again. But the queen said nothing. Her gaze stayed fixed, sharp and unyielding, watching every move. Time bled away. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. The mechanic's hands bled freely now, smearing red across the alien machine's glowing veins. He tore parts from his own toolkit, even stripping wires from his clothing, anything he could use to patch the dying guardian. His body screamed with fatigue, but his mind refused to let go. At last, he reached the core. It flickered weakly, cracked and unstable. His heart pounded as he studied it. One wrong move, and it could collapse entirely. He whispered, "Come on. Just a little longer." With painstaking care, he adjusted the connections, steadying the unstable energy with nothing but a salvaged coil and his own stubborn will. For a long, breathless moment, nothing happened. Then, the core pulsed. Once. Twice. Stronger each time. The guardian shuddered, its body convulsing as light surged through its veins. Sparks flared, then steadied. Its glowing eyes burned bright once more, locking on the mechanic. It let out a low, steady hum, not of pain, but of life. The mechanic collapsed to his knees, gasping, sweat and blood dripping into the floor. He looked up at the Queen with exhausted eyes. "It lives," he whispered. The chamber erupted in chaos. Alien soldiers hissed in disbelief, stamping their tails. The ambassadors fell to their knees in awe. The Queen rose slowly, her towering form casting shadows across the hall. She stepped forward, her golden eyes locked on the Guardian as it rose shakily to its feet, towering over the humans and aliens alike. It lowered its head toward her in a bow. The Queen's voice carried across the chamber, steady and commanding. "You have done what even my own could not. You gave life where there was only death." She turned her gaze back to the mechanic. For the first time, there was no scorn, no mockery, only recognition. "Perhaps," she said softly, "humanity's strength is not in conquest or power, but in this, refusal to let the broken remain broken." The mechanic, still on his knees, forced a tired smile. His voice was barely a whisper. "That's all we are. A species of fixers. We break, we bleed, but we keep trying." The Queen's expression softened, almost imperceptibly. Then she returned to her throne, her soldiers parting in silence before her. "The trial continues," she said. "But know this, human. You have given me something I did not expect: hope." The chamber fell into silence once more, but this time, it was not the silence of fear. It was the silence of something new being born between two worlds. The chamber still hummed with the low vibration of the Guardian's reborn core. The massive being stood steady now, alive once more, its glowing eyes casting light across the faces of alien soldiers and human ambassadors alike. The mechanic knelt at its side, his body trembling with exhaustion. His hands were burned, his muscles ached, and every breath came sharp and shallow. But the Queen was not finished. From her throne, she studied him with a gaze that weighed more than iron. Her golden eyes burned like twin suns. "You have proven your hands," she said, her voice carrying across the hall. "But what of your spirit? How long before even you break?" The mechanic tried to rise, but his knees buckled. He caught himself on one hand, groaning. He felt hollowed out, as though each repair had carved away another piece of him. His voice cracked when he spoke. I don't know how much more I can take." A murmur spread through the ambassadors. One of them, pale with fear, whispered, "He cannot endure this." None could. But the Queen silenced them with a single glance. She rose, her crown of bone gleaming under the pale light. "Then rise, human, and prove it. You speak of scars, of lessons, of strength through pain. Show me whether those words are truth or lies you tell yourself to hide your weakness." Her soldiers brought forth more wreckage. Not simple tools, not small devices, but larger machines twisted beyond recognition. The pile clattered onto the floor, sparking violently, the smell of scorched metal filling the air. The mechanic stared at it, his heart sinking. His fingers twitched, aching to move, but his body screamed for rest. His vision blurred. He had given everything already: his blood, his sweat, his very will, and yet still she demanded more. For the first time, doubt whispered in his mind. What if I fail? What if I am not enough? He thought of Earth. He thought of his sister, of friends long buried. He thought of the weight of every life waiting, watching, depending on him. And in that moment, the burden felt too heavy. He bowed his head, his breath ragged. I can't. The hall stirred. The alien soldiers hissed in triumph, their tails striking the floor. One sneered, the human breaks at last. The ambassadors closed their eyes in despair. But then, faint and steady, another sound filled the chamber. A low hum. The guardian he had repaired stepped forward, its massive frame moving with new life. It loomed over him, its glowing eyes burning bright. The mechanic lifted his head weakly. The guardian bowed, lowering its massive frame as if offering silent support. Its presence was a reminder, a machine he had saved, a life he had refused to let die. He let out a shaky laugh, dry and bitter. "You're right," he whispered to himself. "I can't stop. Not now." Slowly, painfully, he pushed himself to his feet. His legs trembled, his vision swam, but he stood. He faced the wreckage piled before him, his burned hands clenching into fists. "All right," he muttered, his voice low but growing stronger. "Let's see what makes you tick." The hall quieted. The Queen's eyes narrowed as she watched him stagger toward the new pile of broken machines. She had expected him to fall, to surrender. But instead, he bent once more to his task, his hands shaking but determined. Every piece he touched fought him. Sparks lashed his skin, smoke burned his eyes. He cursed under his breath, wiped blood from his palms, and kept going. Each repair was slower now, his strength slipping away with every movement. His body cried for rest, yet his spirit pushed him forward. Hours dragged on. His breath grew ragged. His shoulders slumped. At one point, the tool slipped from his blistered fingers, clattering onto the floor. He stared at it, too weak to bend and pick it up. For a moment, he nearly let go. But then he remembered the Queen's scars. He remembered her voice as she spoke of her child, of her grief, of her survival. He remembered his own scars, the lessons they carried, the lives they honored. And he forced himself to kneel, to pick up the tool, to keep moving. When at last he finished, the chamber glowed with life. The machines hummed and whirred, alive once more. Some sparked faintly, some shuddered with unstable energy, but all of them lived. The mechanic collapsed backward, his body spent. He lay on the cold floor, staring up at the crystal lights above, his chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. The Queen stood slowly, her golden eyes locked on him. The hall was silent. Even her soldiers did not hiss or sneer now. They only watched, their expressions unreadable. She descended from her throne, her steps echoing like drums. She stopped above him, towering over his broken form. For a long moment, she said nothing. Finally, her voice filled the chamber. "You are at your breaking point. And yet you endure. Tell me, human, why?" The mechanic turned his head toward her, his eyes heavy, his voice little more than a whisper. "Because if I give up, then everything we've fought for, everything we've lost, means nothing. I can't let it mean nothing." The Queen's eyes flickered, something unreadable passing through them. She studied him in silence, as though seeing not just a single man, but the weight of an entire species carried in his bloodied hands. Then, softly, almost too softly for the hall to hear, she said, "Perhaps, there is more strength in you than even I believed." The mechanic closed his eyes, his body trembling, but for the first time since the trial began, a small smile tugged at his lips. He had not broken. Not yet. The great chamber was silent except for the faint hum of repaired machines. They glowed softly around the human mechanic, each one alive again because of his burned, trembling hands. He lay sprawled on the cold stone floor, chest rising and falling in shallow breaths, too weak to stand but too stubborn to quit. His body was broken, but his spirit had not given way. The alien Queen towered above him. Her golden eyes studied him with the intensity of a hunter watching prey, but there was no hunger now, no mockery. Something else flickered in her gaze, something her soldiers had never seen before. Her voice, when it came, was not thunder. It was quiet, almost reflective. "I have seen kings beg for mercy. I have seen armies break under lesser trials than this. Yet you, a mechanic, with no crown, no blade, no title, endure where others would fall." The mechanic coughed, forcing himself onto one elbow. His throat burned as he spoke. "I'm not special. I'm just human." The Queen's crest twitched, her sharp features unreadable. Not special, she repeated, as though testing the words. She looked around at the glowing machines he had resurrected, at the towering guardian that bowed in silent loyalty beside him. Her claws tapped against her throne's armrest. If this is not special, then what is? Her soldiers hissed uneasily, their tails striking the stone. They were unsettled, for their queen's tone was changing, shifting from disdain to something far more dangerous, respect. One soldier stepped forward, his voice laced with venom. My queen, this human defile our relics with crude hands. He should be crushed for his insolence. The queen did not turn to look at him. Her eyes never left the mechanic. Slowly, deliberately, she raised one clawed hand. The soldier froze mid-step. Silence fell again, sharp and absolute. The queen lowered her hand and leaned forward. Tell me, human. You speak of scars, of lessons, of rebuilding. But why? Why fight so hard? Why endure so much pain for people who are not here to see it? The mechanic's head sagged. His breath rattled in his chest. For a moment, he said nothing. Then, with effort, he lifted his gaze to hers. His eyes were bloodshot, but steady. Because that's what it means to be human, he whispered. We don't fight because it's easy. We fight because it matters. Even if no one sees. Even if no one remembers. We fight, because someone has to. The words lingered in the air, simple but unshakable. The queen's expression shifted, her golden eyes softening in a way none of her soldiers had ever witnessed. Slowly, she descended from her throne, her massive frame stepping closer and closer until she stood directly above the mechanic. Her shadow swallowed him, but he did not flinch. She lowered herself, bending until her face was only a breath away from his. For a long, tense moment, they locked eyes, human and alien, grease-stained mechanic and radiant monarch. Then, with a voice that carried not just through the hall, but into the bones of everyone present, she declared, perhaps humanity does not deserve extinction. The words struck the chamber like a storm. The ambassadors gasped, some weeping openly. The soldiers growled in disbelief, their tails slamming the stone floor, but none dared oppose her. The mechanic blinked, hardly believing what he had heard. His voice cracked as he whispered, what did you say? The queen rose to her full height, her crown of bone gleaming in the crystal light. She turned her gaze upon the hall, upon humans and aliens alike. Her voice was no longer soft. It was thunder once more. This human has proven what his kind truly is. Not destroyers. Not mere breakers. But fixers. Builders. Survivors. Where others surrender, they rise. Where others abandon, they repair. Humanity will not be erased. Not while such spirit exists within them. The hall shook with her proclamation. Her soldiers shifted, uncertain, their golden eyes wide. The ambassadors bowed their heads, tears streaming down their faces. For the first time since the trial began, hope bloomed like fire in their chests. The mechanic, still on his knees, let out a shaky laugh. Relief washed over him, mingled with exhaustion so deep he thought he might collapse. So, we pass. The queen turned her gaze back to him. Her golden eyes gleamed, and a small, sharp smile touched her lips. You endure. That is more than passing. The guardian stepped forward, towering above them both. It lowered itself, bowing to the queen, then to the mechanic. The sight drew a gasp from the soldiers. Never had one of their sacred guardians acknowledged an outsider. The queen's eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in thought. It seems even the old guardians recognize you. Perhaps your people are worth more than I allowed myself to believe. The mechanic tried to stand, but his legs gave out beneath him. The guardian moved quickly, lowering one massive arm so he could lean against it. He smiled weakly, looking up at the queen. Guess even your machines think I did all right. For a long moment, the queen said nothing. Then, softly, almost to herself, she murmured, "Perhaps, it is not only my people who can learn." She turned, walking back to her throne. But this time, her stride was different. No longer was it the cold march of a conqueror judging a lesser species. It was something else, something heavier, something more thoughtful. When she sat, her golden eyes did not burn with disdain. They burned with respect. The trial was not yet over, but the balance had shifted. Humanity's fate was no longer sealed in blood and silence. For the first time, it teetered on the edge of something greater. The mechanic leaned against the guardian, his chest heaving, a weary smile on his lips. He knew the fight was not done. The queen would test him again. But in that moment, surrounded by glowing machines, under the weight of her respect, he felt it deep in his bones. Humanity had been given a chance. And he would not waste it. The chamber glowed with the hum of restored machines, their faint lights flickering like stars scattered across the floor. The mechanic leaned heavily on the massive guardian he had brought back to life, his body trembling from exhaustion, his hands raw and bloodied. Yet even broken and weary, he stood taller than he had when he first entered the queen's hall. The alien queen rose from her throne, her towering form casting shadows across the stone walls. Her soldiers lowered their heads as she passed, their tails clicking nervously against the floor. She walked slowly, deliberately, until she stood at the center of the hall. Her golden eyes swept across her court, her soldiers, her humans, her guardian, and finally settled on the mechanic. For a long moment, she said nothing. The silence pressed against the hearts of all present, heavy with expectation. Then her voice rang out, low and powerful, carrying to every corner of the chamber. "Your people came here seeking mercy. They came weak, fragile, uncertain. I would have crushed them as I have crushed others before. But today, you have shown me something I did not expect." She raised her clawed hand toward the glowing machines he had repaired, toward the guardian standing alive once more. "You showed me that weakness can be transformed into strength. That failure can be turned into wisdom. That even the broken can be made whole again." Her golden eyes narrowed, her voice trembling with intensity. "And you, human mechanic, proved it not with grand speeches or weapons, but with your hands, your scars, and your refusal to surrender." The ambassadors gasped. One of them fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. The soldiers hissed quietly, unsettled, for they had never heard their queen speak so of any outsider. The queen stepped closer to the mechanic, her towering presence like a mountain before him. "You are no king, no general, no leader of your kind. And yet, today, you have carried the fate of your species on your shoulders. You alone have shown me the truth of humanity." The mechanic swallowed hard, his voice hoarse. "And, what is that truth?" The queen's golden eyes blazed. "That you are survivors. That you fall, but rise again. That you fix what is broken even when it is not your own. For this, humanity shall not be erased. For this, you have earned a place among the living." The words struck the hall like thunder. The ambassadors cried out in relief, their voices breaking with gratitude. Some wept openly, clutching one another. The generals, who had said nothing throughout the trial, bowed low to hide their trembling. Humanity had been spared not by their titles, not by their weapons, but by a mechanic with grease on his hands. The alien soldiers shifted uneasily, but none dared to challenge their queen's decree. Even they had seen what the human had done. Even they could not deny the truth of his endurance. The queen raised both arms high, her voice carrying like a storm. "Let it be known. Humanity is not to be destroyed. From this day forth, they are under my protection. They will be tested, yes, but they will be given the chance to rise, to build, to prove themselves in the years to come." The hall erupted with the sound of alien tails striking the ground, not in mockery this time, but in acknowledgement. A new law had been spoken. A new fate sealed. The mechanic, weak and swaying, let out a long breath. His body slumped, but the guardian lowered its great arm to steady him. He looked up at the queen, a tired smile tugging at his lips. So, humanity lives? The queen's sharp smile gleamed. Humanity lives? The mechanic closed his eyes briefly, letting the words wash over him like cool water after fire. He thought of Earth, of the billions who would never know what happened in this chamber. They would never know how close they came to being erased. And they would never know that their survival was secured not by warriors or kings, but by a tired, grease-stained mechanic. The queen stepped back, her gaze sweeping the humans one last time. "Remember this moment," she said, her voice echoing. "Not for my mercy, but for his courage. Your kind did not survive because of generals or crowns. You survived because one of your own dared to stand when all others were silent." The ambassadors turned their eyes to the mechanic. Their faces were filled with awe, shame, and gratitude. One whispered, "He saved us." Another murmured, "A mechanic, of all people." The mechanic shook his head weakly, his voice rough. "Not me. Humanity. I only showed you what we are." The queen's golden eyes glowed brighter. "Then let it be remembered. Humanity endures. Humanity rebuilds. And humanity fights not with swords, but with will." The guardian bowed low once more, its towering form casting light across the chamber. The mechanic leaned against it, his eyes heavy, his body broken, but his spirit unshaken. He had done what no one else dared. He had spoken when others were silent. He had fought not with weapons, but with his hands and his heart. And because of him, humanity had been spared. The great chamber slowly emptied of tension, but the memory of what had just unfolded would never leave it. The machines glowed like faint stars around the mechanic, the guardian stood tall at his side, and the alien queen sat once more upon her throne. But her eyes no longer burned with contempt. They shone with respect. The mechanic leaned heavily against the guardian, his body battered, his hands blistered and bleeding. Every muscle screamed with exhaustion. And yet, for the first time since stepping foot into the hall, his heart was light. Humanity had been spared. The trial was over. The ambassadors rushed to him, tears streaming down their faces. One knelt beside him, whispering in awe, "You saved us. You alone." The mechanic gave a weak laugh, shaking his head. "Not me. Humanity. I only showed her what we are." The queen rose slowly, her towering form commanding silence once more. The soldiers bowed their heads as her golden eyes swept across the hall. "Let all here bear witness," she said, her voice strong, echoing like thunder. "Humanity lives not by my mercy, but by their own hand. By the will of one who refused to surrender. By the scars that became strength. By the broken made whole again." She turned her gaze directly upon the mechanic. "You, human, carry no crown. You command no armies. Yet you have done more this day than any king or general. Know this: when history speaks of humanity's trial, it will not be the names of diplomats or warriors it remembers. It will be yours." The mechanic bowed his head, humbled and overwhelmed. "I didn't do it to be remembered," he whispered. The queen's smile was sharp, but not unkind. "That is why you will be." The chamber stirred with whispers, both human and alien. For the first time, the walls that had divided them felt thinner, less certain. A bridge had been built not with politics, but with blood, scars, and stubborn hands. The queen raised her hand high, her voice carrying the weight of decree. "From this day forward, humanity will walk among us. They will learn, they will build, they will rise. Not as slaves. Not as prey. But as kin." The soldiers struck their tails against the stone floor, not in mockery this time, but in solemn acknowledgement. The ambassadors bowed low, overcome with relief and awe. The mechanic stood unsteady, the guardian's massive arm supporting him. His voice was quiet, but steady. Then we'll prove worthy of it. We'll stumble, we'll break, but we'll fix it. That's what we do. The queen inclined her head, a gesture so rare her soldiers gasped aloud. See that you do, human. For scars may teach, but only if you honor them. The guardian hummed beside him, its glowing eyes fixed on the mechanic with something like loyalty. The human reached up with a blistered hand and patted its metallic arm. Guess you and me are proof enough. As the hall began to clear, as ambassadors prepared to carry the news back to Earth, the mechanic lingered a moment longer. He looked at the queen one last time. Their eyes met hers, golden and ancient, his weary but resolute. No words were needed. They had both revealed their scars. They had both endured. And in that silent understanding, a new future had been born. When he finally left the chamber, the echoes of the queen's words followed him, not kings. Not generals. A mechanic. On Earth, they would never know how close the end had come. They would never know how their survival had been secured in a hall of stone and firelight, before an alien queen who could have ended them with a single word. But they would feel its echo. They would live to build, to fail, to rise again. And though history would remember the name of a single mechanic, the truth would always be greater that he had spoken not for himself, but for all of humanity. Because in the end, it was not power or glory that saved them. It was something simpler, something stronger. The refusal to give up. The will to rebuild. The courage of one ordinary man. And through him, the truth was revealed. Humanity always fights back.